I remember coming into Daytona for the first time, coming through the tunnel, popping up, and seeing this massive area in front of me, and looking at the banking and going, oh my God, I just can't believe it. This was like 1969. I'd just gotten my racing license. I remember getting in the car and driving around the first time, petrified. Shit. I mean, this is really, it's got a pretty steep 33-degree banking angle, and it just felt like I was going to fall off the side of the mountain. But after about 2 or 3 laps, it all became natural. It felt like, yeah, this is the way it is.
Welcome to an extra special episode of Talking Watches. I'm joined today by the American race car driver and champion, Hurley Haywood. Hurley, it's a pleasure to be here in the Brumos collection in Jacksonville. How are you today?
I'm good, and this facility is just very spectacular. Dan Davis decided to build this, and it houses a lot of our race cars that have history. On both this side that we're on is the race cars, on the other side is the classic cars. So it's really special for us to have this facility.
Well, it's an absolute treat. We're definitely going to get into some cars, as you can see, and certainly some watches.
Yep.
So let's get to it.
Okay.
It's an absolute treat to have you here. You're a legend of endurance racing in general, and certainly you know a thing or two about Daytona as a specialty. Thanks so much for coming on Talking Watches.
It's my pleasure. Believe me, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, this is a really fun time, and obviously you and some of the team from HODINKEE were at Daytona for the weekend, and it was a huge result for Porsche this year, which is very special and certainly close to the sort of work that you're doing with the brand. We can definitely get into racing, and there's certainly a ton of cars here to back us up on that as well. But let's start with watches. I'm seeing a lot of Rolex on the table, and that would make sense given your history with sports car racing and endurance racing and the brand's kind of long-standing presence in that sport. Where does the Rolex thing start for you?
Well, 1969 is when I started racing, and Peter, Greg, and myself won the 6 hours at Watkins Glen. I was sitting on cloud 9. I mean, man, this is really cool. And then shortly thereafter, I got my draft notice from the military, and that race was in June. I was on an airplane in October flying to Vietnam. And when I got to Vietnam, there was a PX there, which was like a gigantic store that had everything you could possibly imagine. I went in and there was a Rolex, a GMT, and I bought it and I paid $260 for it. I was telling that to the Rolex guys down in Daytona, and they said, oh my God, you should have kept that watch, because in that era, that watch today would be worth a lot of money.
You've won Daytona 5 times, which is a record. You share the record for 5 wins, 3 at Le Mans, which is beyond remarkable, and then of course 2 at Sebring. It's an incredible career, and there are some footnotes here that are based in watches. Can you walk us through some of the connections to some of those races and moments?
Well, I think, the major one, the first one was the 1991 race, which I won overall. And this watch was the first watch that I actually won from winning the race.
The two-tone Daytona.
The two-tone Daytona. And Roland Pouton, who was the head of Rolex at that point, wanted to do something special. So normally the watch that you win is stainless steel. This time was going to be the stainless steel and gold. And then he felt that because I had won 4 races at Daytona prior to this one, that he wanted to go back where I could get a watch for all the wins that I won in 1973, 74, 75, 77. So some of these watches were the makeup, so to speak. So everyone, I'm blessed to have a relationship with 2 of the most iconic brands in the world, Porsche and Rolex. the combination between those two companies is really good. So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, they share a sort of entwined history as well, especially around racing and around race car drivers. There's always this sort of popularity, and then of course when the Daytona started to become essentially like a trophy you could wear for having won, and yours has a lovely caseback engraving as well, which makes it all the more special.
This is a badge of honor. If you win this watch or winning the 24 Hours of Daytona, you've done something. That's something special, and it's a badge that you wear with pride, and everybody that knows that history knows that that watch was won by excelling in the 24-hour race. This watch that I'm wearing, this is, I wear this watch quite a bit, so it's pretty warm. But the story behind this watch is kind of interesting. In 1994, I was asked to drive for the factory team at Le Mans again. I decided that I didn't want to take any of the Rolexes over there. So I went out and I bought a Timex Ironman.
Yeah, of course.
And I won the race. On victory lane, I got my arms raised up. And when I got back to the States, I got a call from Roland Pouton. He said, "We're so proud of you. You did a really great job. Do we need to address any of your watches? Do we need maintenance?" And I said, "No, all of my Rolexes are running fine." He said, "Well, I couldn't help but notice that you were not wearing a Rolex on victory lane." So I gave him the story. Everything was cool. And then I got an invite to come up at Christmas time for a lunch that they were going to do. And so at dessert came this box with a Rolex, this Rolex. But what made it unusual was that it had a rubber band on it. And they said, "This is the most inconspicuous watch that we could possibly give you."
A white dial OP, about 36 millimeter on a rubber strap.
Right. Which was not the case, because everybody in the world wanted to know, where did you get that watch? How did you get that? So the watch came with a rubber band and then 4 other rubber bands, because the bands didn't last very long. Maybe 6 months. So when I ran out of bands, I sent the watch back, and Rolex changed it back to its original stainless steel bracelet. Roland Pouton was a great guy, and I had a good relationship with him. And now I have restarted a really nice relationship with Luca, and who's the president and CEO of Rolex USA. So that's a very nice friendship.
And then within the guise of the Rolex stuff on the table, there are a few outliers here in, not in steel or two-tone. We've got a beautiful Datejust, a Cellini, and then of course quite a modern, very gold and on leather Daytona. What's the story behind some of these?
Well, this watch was given to me by my husband to celebrate when we were married, and this, it was pretty special. It's Florentine. You don't see many watches that have the Florentine scaling on it, and I like wearing this watch. It's very light, and it's got a personal history to it. When the Cellini, I asked Rolex, I said, I do a lot of events which require me getting dressed up.
Sure.
And I don't really have a dress watch. So they said, well, we can solve that problem. And this is what they gave me. When I first started, you very seldom put on a tie and a jacket, a sports jacket. But now you have to do that quite often. And when I wear this, it's like they've never seen a watch like this before.
Yeah.
And they said, "What kind of watch is that?" And I said, "It's Rolex." They, "Oh my God, I didn't know Rolex made a watch like that."
Yeah.
So this is a quartz. I like wearing this watch. It really looks good on my wrist, and on the back it's engraved with "Your friends at Rolex." When I was the Grand Marshal at Daytona in 2013, this was what they gave me. Now, the backstory on this watch, they said, "You have so many Rolexes. What do you want?"
I like that whole sentence. That's a really good sentence.
I said, "Well, the watch I really," and this was in all the magazines on the back cover.
Of course.
Magazines. I said, "I really would like one of those watches." And they said, "Yeah, right." And so I figured, that's the end of that story. So during the presentation at Daytona, and I was a Grand Marshal, I had to get up and give a little talk. They handed me this watch and they said, "This is the watch we're going to give you." And I almost fell over. I mean, you know, these are not a cheap date.
No.
And so I was really lucky to get that, and I love wearing this watch.
This is a question we ask a lot of people. It's also a question that guys that love watches and cars kind of wrestle with. In your mind, what's the overlap? Why is it that commonly, if you're really into cars, you probably have some interest in watches, or maybe the other way around?
What goes into making a Rolex is precision. You know, you have to absolutely be perfect in your construction of that watch. The same thing with Porsche. The reason why Porsche are so successful in long distance racing or racing in general is because they pay attention to detail. They don't let anything happen by chance.
Did you wear a watch while running? Was it
Always.
helpful to use the time and that sort of thing?
Always.
Yeah.
I always wore a watch. You have all electronic stuff. You have a timer. You have radio communications. But, you know, every once in a while, I would like to pull my glove down and just kind of look at the watch to see
No, I'm 2 hours in.
how much longer I've got.
You know, when you and I crossed paths a few years back, very briefly in the lobby of a hotel, and without really knowing much about me at all, you were wearing this Yachtmaster and took it off and just handed it to me. I think you're halfway through a phone call or helping somebody, and you were very kind and handed it to me as soon as you knew that I was kind of fascinated in watches. What's the story behind this? Because I think it's one of my favorite references from this generation of Yachtmaster, and it's a very cool watch, and it looks very well worn.
Yeah, I enjoy wearing that watch. I think this was from my 30th anniversary. And I think that's engraved on the back. Yeah, 30 great years. I love wearing all these watches. Sometimes I get in the habit of wearing one watch, and I don't wear these all, but you made the reference, they look well worn.
Mm-hmm.
So every time I wear them, it's kind of an unusual watch, and I like wearing it. A lot of people ask about it. So the latest one that they gave me, this, I wore that on the day that they gave it to me, which was on Saturday morning.
Okay, a couple days ago.
I got a call to be in the Rolex suite at 3 o'clock, and they wanted to talk to me about something. Luca surprised me with this watch. I had no idea that they were going to give it to me. It's marked on the back the 50th. So last year was my actually 50th year of having association with Porsche and with Daytona, and so this was really special. And again, you know, the relationship with Rolex is long, and I'm so lucky to be able to share that history with Rolex and with Porsche, because they both sort of overlap each other.
Right.
So this is one of my favorite cars. This is the car I won Daytona with in 1977. I drove this car with two really amateur drivers, and so I ended up doing an 8-hour shift in this car, but these RSRs were really fun to drive, and it wasn't too physical back then.
Okay.
So you could do 8 hours. It was not, you know, horrendous, but we soldiered on and were able to win the race. This car was a 91710. This is probably the scariest car in the collection to drive. 1,200 horsepower. What made it so unusual was I went from a 300 horsepower 911 into the prototypes with nothing in between. So the guy that came to my rescue was Mark Donahue.
Okay.
And Mark, he said, you know, with these kind of cars, you want to take little steps, and eventually you'll catch up. You don't want to take too big of a step because it'll turn around and bite you. This bus is kind of cool.
I think it's very
So there's only 2 of these in existence. One we have, and the other is at the factory. So those are the driving suits of all the drivers that we've had driving for us.
fantastic.
But on this door panel
Oh yeah.
is people, Manfred Jonker, Brian Redmond, Klaus Bischoff, who was my crew chief in 1977 at Le Mans,
Mm-hmm.
Alan Springer, Hurley Haywood, Roger Penske once said, I've had many teams, I've had a lot of success, but every success came with sort of a different sponsor. So we never had a color identification that when people look at it, they say, oh, that's a Penske car. And he said, I'm very jealous of your paint scheme because anybody that looks at these cars with that paint scheme knows it's a Brumos car.
Yep. And then we have an outlier at the end of the table, a watch I'm quite fond of. That's a Porsche design, chronograph 1 from the Eterna era.
Yep.
What's the story behind that? It's not a watch you see that commonly.
No, and Detlef von Platen, who was the CEO here in the United States of Porsche, gave me this watch, and on the back it's engraved for the 1973 win that Peter and I had. So, you know, I don't wear this watch much, but I enjoy this watch, and I, you know, enjoy it from the side from that Porsche gave it to me. So
Sure.
That was good.
And I think it makes sense, like Hurley Haywood should have a Porsche design chronograph 1 in his collection. We're sitting around a bunch of cars designed by the same guy in some metric, and certainly the brand, even in the years since the Eterna stuff, has become much more reintegrated with Porsche at large. Porsche design, that is, and I think it still remains one of my favorite sort of automotive-derived chronograph designs.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason I don't wear this watch on a more regular basis is because of the relationship I have with Rolex.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So, you know, you know, I'll wear this when I'm not going out in public.
Sure. That or the Iron Man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, beats the Iron Man all the time.
So we've been through most of these watches at this point, but I am curious because there's one here. It doesn't have a case back engraving, does look nicely well worn, so you must enjoy it. It's this Air King. Is that one that you got through the connection to Rolex, or you got on your own?
No, I got this on my own. I think my memory is clear that I bought this when I was down in the islands.
Oh, okay.
I liked it and I bought it. The face on this is so plain and easy to read. You know, the numbers are there, there's no date.
Yeah.
And it's a nice weight, and I just like wearing it. It's simple. I like things that are simple, but I also like things that are complicated, like the Ulysse Nardin. So, and the reason I like that watch was it just is so cool looking.
Yeah, big date, and
Yep.
that's a travel complication.
Yep.
Yeah, so like a push button,
Yep.
dual time.
Yeah.
Clever. And gives you another sort of dressy option.
Yep.
Yeah, probably handy with the travel as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Although now you've got the a new travel
GMT,
companion.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing I like about this watch is you can actually see the date
With the magnifier.
with the magnifier.
Pretty handy.
Some of these magnifiers, like this one, you really have to look at it.
The other thing that I really appreciate about so many of these is that the casebacks are engraved. You
Yeah.
can flip them over and there's a little bit more of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know, for the Rolex fans, I'm not sure there's a cooler caseback than something that's simply sent from your friends at Rolex.
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of people would find quite interesting. But it's not exclusively Rolex on the table. We have some really beautiful stuff with more of a familial connection for you, including that Omega.
Yeah. This Omega was given to my father from my grandmother. And, you know, it's very lightweight. It's, you know, really a beautiful watch.
So
and
pretty.
It's got a lot of, you know, family history to it. So it's not just the watch, but it's what that watch represented. My grandmother gave that to my dad. So that was a pretty cool deal. And then, you know, the pocket watch, which is really something special. This is my grandfather's watch, Ian Hurley Jr. And what makes this watch so cool is that the little book that goes at the end of the keychain has my mother in it, and then on the back side is my grandmother with her mother. So they have that on the keychain, which is a pretty cool deal.
Yeah, it's nice that so much of the set of watches that you brought for us is rooted in like a sentimental, whether it was a great race or part of a great friendship, or in this case, almost like a locket, but taken to kind of the next level with the ability to, almost like how somebody might carry photos on their phone or a couple photos in their wallet,
You know,
you'd have it right with you.
when I look at it, every single watch that I have has got sort of either a personal history or a history from the racing side of it. There's drivers that are millionaires that are running in the 24-hour. They don't need to
win
the
one.
race.
Yeah,
They can afford to buy the watch.
sure.
But when you have that on your wrist and they know that you're a racing driver, they say, "Did you win that at Daytona?" And they said, "Yes, I did." It's a symbol of doing everything perfectly, and the amount of energy that goes into being successful in a 24-hour race is enormous. I would never, ever consider putting these watches on the market.
It'd be like selling your trophies.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not done. And there are drivers that have these watches that have sold them for a lot of money, but that's not going to happen under my watch.